Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the practice questions. I'm going to go from number 5 to the rest. The first, I'm going to talk about number 5. So, an increase in the money supply. And how does it shift to the curve, and how does it shift to the aggregate demand curve? So when we are thinking about the key term money supply, we always think about the theory of liquidity balance. So we're calling the theory of liquidity balance. Here we always remove the y-axis and x-axis. For this question, the y-axis will be R, the interest rate, and the x-axis is the real money balance, which is M divided by P. And the money supply is fixed M divided by fixed P. So that's how they are vertical. So when we're increasing the money supply always increasing, so M is increasing. So the vertical line shift to the right. Right? So interest rate is going down. So how does it affect the M curve? Well, we're calling the M curve is always sloping upward. When there's a decrease in interest rate, M curve shift downward. Okay, so M curve shift downward from R1 to R2. So here we can see a rightward shift of the M curve also. So which means that the Y, the output is also increasing. When we are graphing the aggregate demand curve, because Y is increasing, which means the aggregate demand curve is also increasing. So here, the M curve shifts to the right. So LM shift to the right. So the answer is C for number 5. Number 6. One policy response to the US economic slowdown of 2001 was tax cuts. Okay. So if there's an economic slowdown was about the tax cuts, when we are thinking about government purchase tax, we also think about the Keynesian cross. So everything begin with Keynesian cross. Actual expenditure, planned expenditure, 45 degrees. And the y-axis and the x-axis. I'm going to go for x-axis. Y. This was PE. So when there's a tax cut, what policy is that? It is actually the fiscal policy. Expansionary. What does it mean is that the consumption is going to increase when we be calling the function y equals to c plus I plus g. When there's a decrease in tax. So a plus c can be derived to a equal a plus mpc times y minus t. When t is decreasing, right? When t is decreasing, the disposable income y minus t must be increased. So the whole thing here for c is actually increase, right? So y is also increasing because c is increasing. So we can see there's the upward shift of the graph. This is actually MPC times delta T. So now we have a new equilibrium of y. So this is y1, the original equilibrium, and here's the y2, the new equilibrium. So you always remember that when the cohesion cross is affecting the IS curve, right? And there's an increase in tax. It does not affect the interest rate for the IS model, which means that the IS curve, which is sloping downward, will shift to the right for a given interest rate. If interest rate is right here, because interest rate does not change, right? But y is changing. Y1, Y2. So we can see a shift of IS curve to the right. So in this, we can see if there is a tax cut, there's an increase in there's a shift of the IS curve to the right. The answer is C. Move on. Activate ISM fiscal policy. We're going to number 7 right now. So based on the graph starting from the equilibrium at the interest rate R1 and income Y1. So we're starting from this point. Okay. We're starting from the original equilibrium. When there's a decrease in government service, will generate the new equilibrium combination of interest rate and income. Okay. So again, we're using y equals to c plus I plus g. When there's a decrease in government purchase, y must be decreased. So in this case, this is fiscal contractionary policy, right? According to the cohesion cross model, again, when we see a downward shift of the planned expenditure, and downward shift of the planned expenditure from P1 to P2, we can see the change is actually delta G. So what happened to y? Of course, y is going to decrease. Right? When y is decreasing, the IS curve must shift to the left. IS curve shift to the left. So here, only IS2 is the case, right? Because it is only the curve that is shifting to the left. So we can see R3 and Y2 will be the new equilibrium when we are combining with the ISM model. R3, Y2, B. How to move on? In the Although a decrease in the interest rate would be the result of, and what happened? So when there's a decrease in interest rate, we always draw the SM model first. Oh. Okay. So when there's a decrease in interest rate, what curve does it affect? It affects the M curve, right? So this is LM2. So we can see a decrease in interest rate in this case. So when there's a decrease of M curve, we're calling that taxes, government spending, it is only affecting the IS curve. So C is not correct, B is not correct, right? So when we think about M curve, we always think about the theory of liquidity balance. So I'm going to move this thing over. And we are going to draw the theory of liquidity balance like that. Okay. In this case, we need to decrease the interest rate, right? So the interest going down. So here should be a higher point, and here should be a lower point. So the money supply must be increased in order to make the interest rate going down, and then make the M curve going down, an increase of Y. So A is the answer, increase up in the money supply. The reason that the income responds to a fiscal expansion is generally less in the ISM model that is in the Keynesian cross model is that the Keynesian cross model assume that blah, blah, blah. So I don't have space. I'm going to write that. Let's begin with ISM model. When we are thinking about the income right here, so we are always thinking about Y, right? So this thing, because it mentions about the fiscal expansion, so we need to bring up the Keynesian cross model. Because only the government can affect the Keynesian cross, and the Fed is going to affect the theory of liquidity balance, which affects the LM. But in this case, we are affecting IS. So here, if there's a fiscal expansion. So let's say we are going to increase of delta G or MPC times delta T, which means it is tax cuts. If we are increasing which is shifting the IS curve to the right. Because if there's no LM curve, the IS curve, when the IS curve is shifting to the right, the Y must be increased to this point. But now because of LM, the R, the interest rate R, is going to go upward. Because when people have more income on their hand, the money demand is going to increase. So we need to think about the theory of liquidity balance as well. In this case, that the money demand shifts to the right to a new point. So R1 to R2. So we can see there's an increase in interest rate, right? So let's say here is R1 and here is R2, right? So for this question, I feel like the answer will be ISLM model. Fiscal expansion will not lower the interest rate. It raises the interest rate. So I think the answer is A. Number 10, one policy response to the US economic slowdown of 2001 was to increase money growth. This policy response can be represented in the ISM model by shifting the curve to curve. So again, when we are increasing money growth, when we think about money, we always think about the the LM model, right? The LM, because it is affecting LM. If there's an increase in money growth, think about this. When there's an increase in money growth, that means the nominal GDP will increase, right? When the nominal GDP is increasing, the money supply is going to shift to the right. Money supply is going to shift to the right, which decreasing the LM curve. So shifting to the right, M curve shifting to the right. So A is the answer. Let me check this. Yep. And number 9 is also 8. Perfect. 11. Based on the graph, starting from equilibrium at interest rate R1 and income Y1, a decrease in the money supply would generate the new equilibrium combination of interest rate and income. So it's basically the graph question again. So when there's a decrease in money supply, we always think about the theory of liquidity balance, right? The decrease in money supply. So shift the curve to the right, to the left, which increases the interest rate from R1 to R2, right? So M curve is going to shift to upper part from R1 to R2. So in this case, because we are starting from R1 to Y1, so the only M curve this above M1 is actually M2. So the equilibrium between IS1 and M2 is actually R2 and Y2. A is the answer. Both in the IS7 model in a closed economy, an increase in government spending increases the interest rate and crowds out, blah. So IS7 model again, government spending, so Keynesian cross, increase in interest rate and crowds out. When there's a government spending increases. It makes the IS curve shift to the right. Right, so here we can see an increase in both interest rate and Y2. Increase in interest rate leads to the increase in output. This is the general idea. And the question is now asking, what does it crowd out? When interest rate is increasing, think about the relationship between investment and interest rate. When there's an increase in interest rate, there must be a decrease in investment. So B is the answer. Okay, 14. Based on the graph, starting from equilibrium and interest rate R3, income Y2, IS1, and M1. If there is an increase in government spending, let's shift the IS curve to IS2. Then in order to keep the interest rate constant, the Federal Reserve should do the money supply and shifting to do, right? So again, we have an equilibrium at R3. Income Y2, IS1, and LM1. IS1, LM1. So I believe it's right here. The graph is kind of messed up, I know, but it's not that complicated. So when there's an increase in government spending, what does it affect? It affects Y, right? Because everything here, if we're increasing G, we're increasing Y. So Y is shifting from Y1 to Y2. Of course, pen expenditure. In this case, we can see a shifting of the IS curve. Right, for the given same R interest rate. So ISM model right here. So if the here we can see if we combine it with a model, we can see there is the increase. We can see there's an increase in both interest rate and income. And the question said, then in order to keep the interest rate constant, so we have to bring the interest rate down here. right? How can we shift the IS curve? How can we shift the LM curve? I'm sorry. How can we shift the IM curve? So we need to shift the LM curve downward, right? We need to shift the LM curve downward so we can lower the interest rate. So we calling the money of liquidity balance. The theory of liquidity balance. I'm sorry, but when there's a decrease in interest rate, we must shifting the money supply to the right, so we can lower down the interest rate, right? So money supply must be increased. So the LM curve, when we are going from here and now, because we are going to have a fiscal policy, so the point should be go to here, and then we are going to the original interest rate, which we goes from here to here. So this is what? This is LM2, right? So LM2. Increase LM2 is the answer for this question. 15. Okay, we have question about tax cuts. So when we are recalling tax cut, we have to expand the consumption function plus I plus G. So we can see the tax. The tax cut means that consumption is increasing because Y minus T is increasing when T is decreasing. So everything here should be increased. C is going to increase. So Y is also going to increase, right? When there's an increase in C, it also increasing Y. Bring up the Artesian cross model again. Now we are affecting delta T times MPC. Delta Y. So it should shift the IS curve, right, for the given interest rate, because we are never changing the I component. So R is going to stay the same, but Y here, the output Y or the income Y should be increased. So always remember that when there's an increase in IS curve, and when there's a shift of the IS curve to the right, aggregate demand curve is going to shift to the right also, because this is the aggregate demand model. If we remember what the Y and X-axis, the Y-axis is actually P, and the X-axis is actually Y, right? When there's an increase in Y from Y1 to Y2, there must be an increase for aggregate demand from Y1 to Y2. So here's Y1, here's Y2. So we can see the aggregate demand curve is shifting to the right. And because we are only affecting the IS curve, so C is wrong. So only A is correct. Okay, well, the answer is A. Okay, never mind. 16. The aggregate demand curve generally slopes downward and to the right because for any given money supply M, a higher price level P cause a good real money supply M divided by P, which did the interest rate and did spending. Okay. We're always speaking, if we see something like this, we always think about the theory of liquidity balance. And the question said for any given money supply M, so that M is going to stay the same. And there's a higher price level P, which means that the P is increasing. If the denominator is increasing, which means the vertical line is going to shift to the left. Okay, so what happened to the interest rate? The interest rate actually going up from R1 to R2. So when there's an increase in price level P, we can see the real money supply is actually going down. So lower, right? So what happens to the interest rate? The interest rate always going up. So A is the answer. Again, A is the answer. And because there's increase in interest rate, think about the Y equals to C plus I plus G. And we can rewrite it as IR plus G. When interest rate is increasing, that means the whole thing is actually decreasing, which means that Y is decreasing also. So there must be a reduces in spending. So that's it for the question. I don't want to see the answer right now, and I'm not sure the answer, so I don't want to grade my work in front of people because I feel like if I get it wrong, that's so dumb. So I will give you guys an update if I get everything correct. So see you next time.